Hi everybody, Dan Illman, Mike Beer, the DRFBets race of the day for Saturday, March the 30th. Race number 14 at Gulfstream Park, a very important Kentucky Derby prep race. It's the Grade 1 $1 million Florida Derby. It's the last race on the card at Gulfstream Park, but DRFBets will reward you if you bet the first race on the Gulfstream and or the card at Maidan, because you get the first post bonus on the Kentucky Derby prep races. Bet $25 to win on one horse in race number 1, get a $10 bonus. DRF.com/preps is where you need to go for all of the details. Let's take a look at the field for the Florida Derby. You can access free formulator past performances for this race on the Race of the Day event page at DRF.com. Download them, handicap along with us. We'll take the field in post position order, beginning with the morning line favorite, the number 1 Hidden Scroll, Mike, who was the beaten favorite in the Fountain of Youth Stakes. But they were asking a lot in start number 2, stretching out around 2 turns for the first time, facing winners obviously for the first time, and he just took pace heat from the start, put away a couple of foes, and was pretty game, I thought, to only get beat 3 lengths by some solid closers.
Yeah, I mean, all in all, even though I think you could look at it as a little bit of a disappointment off of his debut, I mean, he actually ran very well in the Fountain of Youth. You know, the whole thing sort of started right at the break for him, because he didn't get out of the gate that well. It was hard to tell on the head-on replay if he got bumped or if he stumbled a little bit, but he just didn't break that well. I think that forced Rosario's hand, and it just put this horse in a really bad spot, because after Rosario had to ask him, he then rushed up. He got hooked up in that duel with the stretch-out sprinter, and it really cost this horse at the end. I mean, all in all, he ran great. His debut was obviously one of those eye-opening performances. So the question now is, you know, what happens at the start of this race? Does he just go right to the front here if he breaks? I feel like that's what they should do. He needs points to get into the Derby. He needs to win this race. I think they will send him. I think he's going to be pretty hard to beat here.
Now, of course, much was said after the Fountain of Youth how Bill Mott was going to train him to rake behind horses,
so that he would be able to
finish better. But when the post positions came out, he drew the rail. It's a short run to the first turn. He has big speed. Timeform US has Hidden Scroll going on the lead, albeit with the fast-paced designation. And now we have to talk about some of the pace horses. We'll get to them in a little bit, but they may not be as... Listen, Gladiator King was something like $1 million to 1 in the Fountain of Youth, but he's not a bad horse. Yeah. He came back to win the Swale. The pace horse in here likely to challenge him, Hard Bell, is Gladiator King's stablemate, but he's not 10 lengths the horse Gladiator King is.
No, he's not. It doesn't seem like he can really affect Hidden Scroll as much as that horse did. The other thing that you think you want to keep in mind about Hidden Scroll, too, is off of his 2 races, because you mentioned Gladiator King, who did come back to win a graded stakes sprinting. Even the horses that he just buried in his debut, it feels like almost all of them who have come back to run have improved out of that race. It feels like he actually beat a good field very handily first time out. Obviously, he beat raced a good horse into the ground last time too. This horse, he's got quite a bit of talent.
It was the Hutchison, the Gladiator King, came back to win. The number 2 is Current. This one's going out for trainer Todd Pletcher. He is a graded stakes winner on the turf, but he certainly has enough pedigree for dirt. He's by the great stallion Curlin. He is a half to Ashland Stakes winner Weep No More, the second dam Kentucky Oaks winner Flute, and his one and only start on dirt. You could probably give him a big excuse because it was over a sealed, sloppy track.
Yeah, I would give him an excuse for that. Not only was it a wet track, he got bumped at the start. He was way out of it. When you watch the replay, you could see he didn't really run that well in there, but he also got held up all the way around the second turn, like he couldn't get a run going. He just didn't kick through the stretch. I'm not going to worry about that race. I don't know if I think he's a dirt horse, Dan, but I mean, he's at least a little bit interesting. He's good on turf. I thought his seasonal debut back in February was actually a pretty good performance. A Thread of Blue just sort of walked on the lead in there. This horse was wide. He was finishing gamely in there. I think this horse is a little interesting at a price maybe to use underneath.
You gave out the number 3 Harvey Wallbanger at odds of almost 30 to 1 in the Grade 2 Holy Bull. He came with a rush to win that race, in a race that kind of seemed to fall apart a bit late. Yeah, but Timeform US, as we saw, has that fast-paced designation. There should be a good pace for Harvey Wallbanger to close into yet again, and he is fresh. He skipped that war in the Fountain of Youth.
Yeah, he did. I mean, all those things sort of point to him to maybe being able to take another step forward here, which, I mean, he's just going to have to do. I think his races overall are pretty good. It's worth pointing out, though, that the Holy Bull not only set up well for him, he got a perfect ride from Brian Hernandez right up the inside. I think that made a little bit of the difference in there. A horse who has to improve, but it's not out of the question that he could do it in here.
Third choice on the morning line is Or Bourbon War, going out for trainer Mark Henning, who finished ahead of Hidden Scroll last time out. Now, he was just out-sprinted in the early portion of the race. Irad Ortiz had him inside. He took him off the rail on the backstretch. I liked the way he split horses on the turn, eased to the outside in the stretch. It took him a little while to change leads, but once he did, he leveled off with a good kick. And if you're a gallop out fan, he galloped out far ahead of that field.
Yeah, a lot of things, went well for him in that race, considering how the pace was for him, and he needs a pace like that, it seems like. He still ran pretty well. If I'm being sort of honest about that race, I see him and the horse that won that race, Code of Honor, who both overall got really good trips and good setups in that race. I didn't necessarily think either one of them, finished really strong in that race, but I think they both ran well. And I like Bourbon War. I like basically all of the races that he's run. He feels like he's going to get another good setup in here. I don't really feel like 1.1 1/8 is going to be too far for him. I think he's very dangerous in here.
Harvey Wallbanger was a shocking winner of the Grade 2 Holy Bull, but even more stunning was the fact that Everfast at 128 to 1 was able to finish second. Now, perhaps Everfast did not flatter the Holy Bull when he came back in the Fountain of Youth, and he didn't run very well. He was wide that day, but I still think this horse has a lot to prove.
I do too. It just seems like he's not like a real player on the Triple Crown Trail, so these races probably just too tough for him. Going back to the Holy Bull, though, I mean, if you like Harvey Wallbanger, this horse might have run better than Harvey Wallbanger in that race. He was closer to the pace. He had to move to the outside in the stretch, while Harvey Wallbanger got right up the rail and didn't have to ever leave the inside. This horse ran well in that race. It still doesn't feel like it makes him a contender in this race, though.
As for Hard Bell, you have to assume he's going to try to play the role of Gladiator King in this spot. He's stretching out from 6 furlongs to 1 1/8. He's 1 for 13. On paper, it looks like he has absolutely no chance to win. But if he is fast enough and Hidden Scroll is sent, there is a chance he can affect the outcome by softening up Hidden Scroll for the closers.
I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, I would look at it this way. If this horse is really going to compromise Hidden Scroll in this race, then Hidden Scroll is just not that good.
I agree. The 7 is Maximum Security, and I think Jason Service is very, very pleased with the post position draw here. He is hoping that Hard Bell and Hidden Scroll go hammer and tongs for the early lead, and Maximum Security can perhaps sit a nice trip in third. This is a horse who debuted for a $16,000 maiden claiming tag. He won by the length of the stretch. He has run twice since then against weak optional claiming foes. He has destroyed those horses. This is a giant step up in class, a giant step up in distance, but he's coming off a 102 Beyer speed figure, and he's got a little bit of pedigree. His sire won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and the dam's a half to the 2-time Jockey Club Gold Cup winner flat out. He's an intriguing horse. He's the X factor in this race, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he is. I'd be very interested to see what he does. The more I look at him, and I like all 3 of his races. I especially like his race 2 back. I know it was a wet track, but that was the only time he didn't make the lead. He was fine with that. He came 4 wide. He won very easily that day. He's not my kind of horse, Dan. Stepping way up in class like this, stretching out for the first time, and not just stretching out to 9 furlongs against these horses. I just have a feeling it's going to be way too tough for him, but I'm very interested to see how he runs.
I think a pretty good trip is coming, although he might be chasing the fastest pace he has seen at, obviously, the longest distance he has ever raced. The 8 is Bodie Express. Now, Bodie Express is a maiden taking on winners, and that's a lot to ask, but he's also coming out of a very fast maiden race. He earned a 91 Beyer speed figure after getting wired by a Jorge Navarro first-time starter named Shantz, and he's got the pedigree, I think, to get the distance. He's by Bodemeister. The dam's a half to a horse that, while a graded stakes winner sprinting on the turf, won at distances up to 9 furlongs. You have to prove, though, that last race wasn't an anomaly.
Yeah, you do. And I think you also, with a horse like him, you have to prove that he just didn't really appreciate turning back distance. This horse is fine to me. His races are okay. If he was running in a maiden race on this card, I think you'd have to take him very seriously, obviously. I think he ran really well last time. I just don't like him in this race.
The problem also is that Hidden Scroll gave him a comprehensive beating 2 starts back. Code of Honor is the second choice in this race, and he beat 4 of these common foes when he upset Hidden Scroll in the Fountain of Youth. And listen, he just got a beautiful ride from John Velasquez that day, breaking from the inside post, saving ground, splitting horses, back to the rail, back to the 2-path. Everything worked out beautifully for Code of Honor, and he showed the class that he showed in the Champagne in his second lifetime start. Listen, this is a talented horse that, if you give him the right pace and trip scenario, is going to run. He only has 1 bad race on his card, the Mucho Macho Man, and I think any handicapper could make the argument he was undertrained for that race, and the trip but didn't exactly work out for him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the argument that Shug made for him right after the race. He just wasn't sharp for that race. He didn't have the fitness that was required, and they went harder on him leading into the Fountain of Youth, and it paid off for them. Yes, it paid off with a perfect trip, but this is the kind of horse, I mean, what makes you think, aside from him stumbling at the start of the Champagne, what makes you think he can't get a perfect trip in this race? He can. He's a nice horse. I find myself wanting to be against him in here because he was such a good price last time, and everything worked for him in there, but I'm not going to be surprised when he runs well again.
No reason to think why he and Bourbon War won't be running at the end of this race if the pace is hot. The 10 is Union's Destiny. He has yet to take a backward step on the Beyer speed figure scale, but he really didn't do too much in the Fountain of Youth. He had a lousy post that day, was wide going into the first turn, and he has a lousy post on Saturday.
Yeah, nothing really changed for him. He hasn't done anything wrong on the track. These races seem like they're just too tough.
Garter and Tie is one of those honest Florida breds that seems to show up each and every year in these races. He is a stakes winner at this meet, going a one-turn mile. The blinkers are coming off after the Holy Bull, where he threw a fit before the start of that race, and he flipped Tyler Gaffalione right off before the start. I think that just took him out of his game. My main concern, besides the post position, besides the height and classes, I don't think this horse is a mile and an eighth horse.
I don't either. Listen, he is what he is. There's nothing to knock about him. He's actually a pretty nice horse. Another horse that in a race like this, it just feels like he probably can't go with these horses, especially from post 11.
Let's take a look at our top picks for the Grade 1 Florida Derby, our Saturday race of the day. And listen, we both think that Hidden Scroll is just going to get a better setup this time around. And we think he'll dissuade Hardbell a lot easier than he dissuaded Gladiator King. The question is what happens when Maximum Security comes calling. I'm assuming he'll be the first to challenge.
Yeah.
He should be in front turning another stretch.
I mean, he should be. Listen, it's not like he doesn't have anything to prove still, because he
has a lot to prove still.
But he's just, we're getting, further along on the Triple Crown Trail now, and it's like every week that goes by, nobody really distinguishes themselves, and I think it just keeps putting Hidden Scroll in a better position. He has to go out there now on Saturday and prove it, and prove that he belongs with these horses, that he's one of the better 3-year-olds. Personally, right now, I think that he is. And I think that if Castellano can get him to break from the gate, he should just go right to the front in here. And I think that makes him really hard to beat.
Mike's going 1-4-2-9. I'm going 1-7-9-4 in the DRFBets Saturday race of the day, the Grade 1 Florida Derby, race number 14. Remember to bet race number 1 at Gulfstream on Saturday. You get your first post bonus. Bet $25 to win on one horse in race number 1. You get a $10 bonus, win or lose with DRFBets. It's as easy as ready, set, bet. Approximate post time for the Florida Derby, 6:36 Eastern. Good luck.